Okay. Welcome, everybody. Hi. My name is Jordan Steifman. I am the Assistant Director of Online Learning and Alumni Engagement at Pardes North America. We're thrilled to be starting off the secular new year with some Torah learning as we continue our Legacy Learning Series, which is a monthly online learning series featuring legacy faculty members in honor of Pardes' 50th anniversary celebration. Today, we are honored to be learning with Rabbi Hirschfield. Tzvi teaches Talmud, Halakha, and Jewish thought at Pardes. Tzvi is my teacher, and I'm sure the teacher of many of you, as he's been teaching at Pardes now for 23 years. Pretty amazing.
Wow.
So with that,
I was 10 when I started. I was very advanced.
With that, I will turn it over to you, Tzvi, and for the rest of you, feel free to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable doing so, and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Kol hakavod to all of you. A lot of familiar faces. It's very exciting to see you. I like this topic tonight. It's a topic that I actually struggle with and think about a lot. So I'm very excited to hear your wisdom about this topic. So when you want, because I can't see most of you when we are learning, if you use the hands up feature, Yarden, that's where would they find that?
They would
under reactions, maybe?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
So if you go to reactions and go to raise hand, you'll appear on my screen. Hi, Karen. Were you just demonstrating for everyone, or did you have something you wanted to say?
Just showing how to do it.
Okay, good for you. Terrific. So we're going to jump in and get started. And again, use the hands up, or if you want to type into the text. I don't always see the text because I'm not a good multitasker, but I'll do the best I can with that. So Yarden dropped the source sheet into the chat. So we should be all ready to go. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can follow along with the source sheet together. Just looking for that. Okay, here we go. I realize this isn't the fancy one with the cool header on it. This is just my word copy, so I apologize. But everyone got the fancy one, right? They did, I think. Okay, in any event, here we go. So we're going to begin by looking at Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, of the most famous of the Tanaim, who, of course, according to his own, the Talmudic legend or story, started learning Torah at the age of 40. There was a time in my life where I thought that was very old. Now that's not looking so old. That's looking quite young, but it shows you how perspective changes. And I want to explore with you something about Rabbi Akiva in terms of his personality, where he truly embraces what I would call opposite ends of the spectrum at the same time. And I want to begin by starting out with Rabbi Akiva's teacher, Nachum Ish Gamzu. Now, Nachum Ish Gamzu presumably is called Ish Gamzu because he came from a place called Gamzu, but you'll see in a moment they do a play with his name. And what's interesting about him is he is not quoted in the Talmud anywhere under halachic setting. The only thing we have about him is a couple of stories. So even though he's mentioned as Rabbi Akiva's teacher, he seemed to have been Rabbi Akiva's teacher in theology or belief or religious practice, and not in terms of halakha or learning. So let's begin by looking at I think, a very interesting and somewhat strange story about Nachum Ish Gamzu. The story begins as follows. The Gemara begins by asking, "V'mai karule Nachum Ish Gamzu?" Why do they call him Nachum Ish Gamzu? Of course, the simple answer can't be that he came from Gamzu, or else we'd have no story to tell. The reason the Gemara says is that any matter that occurred to him, he would say, Gamzu l'tova, this too is for the good. Anything that happened to him, he would say, Gamzu l'tova, it's all for the best, it's all for the good. And now they're going to illustrate with the story. Zimna chada ba'al l'shadurei Yisrael darom levei Kesar. The Jews had to send a gift. Now, gift is sort of a euphemism, a bribe, a payment. They have to appease the emperor. And if this fails, everyone's in very serious trouble. They say, who should go and do it? Let Nachum Ish Gamzu go. And the phrase here is very interesting. He's accustomed to miracles, which presumably means miracles happen for this guy. Now, based on that, it sounds like that this gift is not a slam dunk. There's what to be worried about here. And Nachum Ish Gamzu is recognized as somebody who gets miracles. Of course, in the juxtaposition of why he always says Gamzu Latova might be connected to the fact everything is for the good, because things always work out for him, because there's always a miracle involved. Let's see what happens. They sent him with a chest full of jewels and pearls, and he went and spent the night at a certain inn. Okay, he's traveling, he's on the way, he goes to a place for the night. And then take a look at what happens next. During the night, the residents came and they stole all of his jewels, and instead they just put dirt there, afar. They put dirt, replaced the jewels with dirt. And of course, Nachum Ish Gamzu, part of his whole personality is he doesn't check. Apparently, I guess he doesn't even hide the fact he's got this chest with pearls and gold. Gamzu Latova. Everything will always work out. He seems to take no precautions. He seems to just let things happen as they're going to happen. When he arrived there at the palace, they opened the chest and they saw that it's filled with dirt. This is not good that it's filled with dirt when you're bringing a gift to the king, to the emperor. The king wants to put all the Jewish emissaries, all the people in the group to death. He said, the Jews are mocking me. How else can I understand? They send me dirt. They're rebelling. They're making fun of me. They don't take me seriously. Of course, now there's tremendous panic. The emperor is furious. They're all about to die. And Nachum Ish Gamzu says, Gamzu Latova. It's all for the good. Everyone's hysterical. He's totally calm. So, of course, who's going to appear? Nachum Ish Gamzu is accustomed to miracles. Who's going to appear? Eliyahu Hanavi appears. He shows up looking like one of the ministers, and he said to the king, he says to the emperor, hey, I have an idea. Maybe this earth is from their father Abraham. Maybe this is special earth. This isn't simple earth. As when he threw earth, it turned into swords. When he threw stubble, it turned into arrows, as is written, and he quotes from Yeshayahu. His sword makes them as dust, his bow as the driven stubble. In the Hebrew, it works out better because the Hebrew, you can almost translate as the afar became his cherev. The dirt became his sword, and the stubble or the straw moved or was shot by his bow. Quote from Yeshayahu. So Eliyahu comes along and says, well, hold on. Maybe this is miracle dirt. Maybe this is dirt that's like a secret weapon. So what are you going to do? You're going to test it out. There was this one province the Romans weren't able to conquer. They tested it and they conquered it. This earth works. You throw this earth at people, it becomes swords and it becomes arrows. It's magical earth. It's the earth of Avraham Avinu. They're so excited. They go into the treasury and they fill Nachum Ish Gamzu's chest with precious jewels and pearls and sent him off with great honor. I want you to notice, he doesn't say at this point, Gamzu Latov. He doesn't seem to react ever. Not and when he's in great danger and not when he's being filled up with wealth. Everything for him just is as it's going to be. So now he comes back to spend the night at the very same inn. And I want you to notice something. He goes back to the same place where they stole from him. The same place where they stole from him, once again, with the chest filled with jewelry and pearls. And the residents said, hey, what did you bring to the emperor that he gave you such great honor? And he says simply, what I took from here, I brought there, right? I didn't interfere. I didn't even open the box. I simply took what I was given and brought it. Completely passive, completely going with whatever is sent his way. Now they're all excited. They think that it's unbelievable. The dirt in our inn is magical. So they tear down their inn, they bring all this earth to the king's palace, and they say to the emperor, hey, you know that special dirt that rabbi brought? That was ours. Of course, the emperor tests it out, and it's not magical at all, and all the residents of the inn are put to death. End of story. What do we know about Nachum Ish Gamzu? We know Nachum Ish Gamzu apparently is a person who merits miracles. Miracles happen for him. We also know that Nachum Ish Gamzu is somebody that quite literally he simply brings from there to here. He doesn't intervene. He doesn't try to move things around. Gam zu l'tova. Whatever happens is all for the good. And he just accepts and accepts and accepts. And for him, it all works out. So the Talmud comes along. Any comments on that story or questions on that story before we move ahead? I don't see any hands up. So I'm assuming we're okay. Yes, Deborah. You're on mute, though.
Do we feel bad for the inn people?
Do we feel bad? Well, the inn people set him up to be murdered by the emperor. So maybe we don't feel so bad for the inn people. First they stole and they sent him up to be murdered. But it's an interesting question. He doesn't intervene on their behalf either. Right? He doesn't say to them something like, you guys should know a miracle happened for me. That dirt that you guys tricked me with turned out a miracle happened. Instead, he's so passive that they draw a conclusion that all the dirt is magical. So everyone is active. He's passive. Let's move ahead to our friend Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva, according to the Talmud, is a student of Rav Nachum Ish Gamzu, and there's another story told about Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara or the Talmud relates the following about Rabbi Akiva. Olam yadam ragil omar kol David Rahmana latava. Rabbi Akiva used to tell people that everyone should always say, right? A person should be habituated to saying everything that God does is for the good, which is almost a parallel to Gamzu l'tova, only he adds what God does. Whereas Nachum Ish Gamzu said anything that ever happens is all for the good, Rabbi Akiva says everything that God does is for the good. And we'll see maybe that's a little bit different. Kihad Rabbi Akiva havaka azil ba'orcha. When Rabbi Akiva was traveling along the way, he came to a certain city, Mata li Mata, ba'u shpize lo yaivle. He looked for a place to stay. It's always an inn. These rabbis always get into big trouble when they're on the road in inns. And he's looking for a place to stay. He can't find one. Amar kol David Rahman latav. Everything God does is for the good. Sound familiar? Azal ubat bedabra, v'have bahade tarnagola, v'chamra, v'shagra. So he goes out into the desert outside the city to sleep in the field, and he has with him a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. If you're ever wondering what to pack for your trip, now you know Rabbi Akiva, when he traveled, rooster, donkey, candle. The donkey to ride and carry his stuff, the rooster to wake him up in the morning, or perhaps to eat if he needs for dinner, and the candle so he can see. Okay, sounds good. So what happens? A gust of wind comes and blows out the candle. A cat came along and ate the rooster, and a lion came and ate the donkey. This is not good. Everything he had with him is gone. And he said, everything, again, Gam, everything is latava. Everything that God does, kol David Rahmana latava. It's all for the good. That night, an army came and took the city into captivity. It turned out that Rabbi Akiva alone, who was not in the city and had no lit candle, noisy rooster, or donkey to give away his location, was saved. So similarly to the story of his Rebbe, in spite of everything looking terrible, it all works out in his favor. It's all l'tov. And he comes back and he says, see, I told you guys, everything that God does is for the good. So we have here an image of Rabbi Akiva, who, like his Rebbe, seems to say that everything that happens is for the good. It's all for the good. It's all for the good. And therefore, there's never a reason to complain, never a reason to get angry, never to think that anything is going wrong. Everything is happening in the best way that it's supposed to happen. And that is what Rabbi Akiva is putting out there as a student of Rav Nachum Ish Gamzu, with perhaps the minor shift of saying that everything God does as opposed to everything is for the good. Okay? So I would say perhaps the height of this image of Rabbi Akiva is the story of Masechet Brachot when he is martyred. B'sha'ah shehotziu et Rabbi Akiva lahariga b'zman kriyat Shema. When Rabbi Akiva was being taken out to be executed, it was time for the Shema. They were literally raking his flesh with iron combs. He was accepting upon himself the yoke of heaven. He was reciting the Shema. Amrulo Talmidav, Rabbeinu ad kan. Even now, even at this point, where's your anger? Where's your outrage? That this is how your life is ending, with this kind of suffering. Where's your disappointment? And yet here you're saying Shema. You're still, aren't you upset with God, angry with God? Want to shout and shake your fist at God? He answers them, Kol yamai iti mitzvero pasuk zeh b'chol nafshecha. I've always been bothered by the idea of b'chol nafshecha, that you have to love God even to the point, afilu notelet nishmatcha, even to the point where he will take your life. Amarti, I said to myself, Matai yavo li'adai v'ekamena. When am I going to have a chance to fulfill the mitzvah up until this point? V'achshav shebal yadi lo ekamenu. Now that it's come into my hands, I shouldn't fulfill it. Hayam arich bechad ad shiyatzah nishmato bech. He lengthened his saying of the Shema until he died as the word echad came out of his mouth. Yatzta ba'kol v'amra ashrecha Rabbi Akiva yeshasanish v'chabech. The voice came out from heaven and said, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, that your soul left your body as you uttered the word. One. Yes, Judith.
Thank you. Does this have any connections to the Akedah?
In the sense of, well, I guess in a certain way, Rabbi Akiva is an Akedah that, actually happens, right? There's no angel in the end. I like your point. The angelic voice comes afterwards. The angelic voice praises Rabbi Akiva, but doesn't save Rabbi Akiva. And what I think is so powerful and disturbing here is even at this point, Rabbi Akiva is focusing on this mitzvah that he can fulfill, that he's passing a test, that he's able to bring his belief into the fullest expression without anger, without yelling, without all the ways I think we would expect a person to react. Rabbi Akiva accepts his execution. Yes, Allison. You're on mute.
I'm a little disturbed by the first story. I was trying to raise my hand, but couldn't get. That if Nachum Ish Gamzu is if miracles come his way, how do you accustom yourself to thinking that miracles are going to come your way? I mean, that it's sort of all based on the fact that he always received miracles.
Right. So it's a great question. You can look at that and say, of course he can do the Gamzu Latova because it always works out for him. Which is why the Rabbi Akiva story comes along and says, even when it doesn't work out, you have to say there's a tova in here. I think it's an important question. The other thing that we could ask is maybe the people that are able to see the tov all the time, they feel that miracles are always happening for them, right? It might be a matter of perspective. When they believe that everything is for the best, somehow they're able to see the best in what's happening in front of them. And maybe that's part of the message there. It might not mean that miracles always happen. In fact, we know Nachum Ish Gamzu in another story ended his life in terrible suffering. But if I had my time, I would show you that text as well. But it might be the idea is that if you leave room for miracles, then you're going to see miracles everywhere. But it's your question. Your question is better than my answer. That's usually the case, everybody.
No.
Anybody else? So I want to share with you Tara Brock who is a Buddhist Rebbe of mine for a while. This is the quote from her book about radical acceptance. Nothing is wrong. Whatever is happening is just real life. The great gift of a spiritual path is coming to trust that you can find a way to true refuge. You realize that you can start right where you are in the midst of your life and find peace in any circumstance. Even at those moments when the ground shakes terribly beneath you, when there's a loss that will alter your life forever, you can still trust that you will find your way home. This is possible because you've touched the timeless love and awareness that are intrinsic to who you are. Now, if you shuffle some of the Buddhist language around and you put in Gamzu Latova or everything that God does is for the good, you can both see the advantages and strength in what's being offered there, right? If everything is for the Tov, then in a certain way, nothing can ever ruin me, right? I always trust I'll find my way home because there's this timeless love. In the Jewish tradition, we would say God that assures that basic relationship and that ultimate purpose can't ever be taken away from you, no matter what's happening in the world. Meaning, from this perspective, Gamzu Latova is almost saying, you can't take the Tov away from me. And that is the gift, she is saying, of radical acceptance. When I'm able to accept everything that happens, then in a way, nothing can ruin me, nothing can destroy me, nothing can wreck me. As long as I, what she's suggesting there, give up my need to judge and evaluate what's happening to me, which is in a sense parallel to Nachum Ish Gamzu and Rabbi Akiva. I don't judge it. I assume it's for the good. I don't try to discern it or explain it. I assume it's all for the good. And there's a power in that. There is a tranquility. There is a calm. There is a resilience that's going to be offered in that. But potentially, there is a potentially very big negative downside to that approach as well, which is what we're going to look at when we look at another element of Rabbi Akiva. I just want to pause for a second. Anybody have a question or a comment they would like to make?
I'll also say, feel free to unmute yourself if you can't figure out how to raise your hand, but I see one hand raised.
Okay, Michael.
So I think that this piece that you just gave us on Akiva comes from the section where the Talmud is talking about the difference between the Baruch Dayan HaEmet. When do we say, blessed is the true judge, and when do we say, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other one, but is Baruch Dayan HaEmet, are you? Thank you, Tov HaMeitim.
Right, exactly. The Mishnah says, Chayav levarech adam ala tov ve'ala ra. That's exactly correct.
So is Baruch Dayan HaEmet, is that radical acceptance? Does that match up?
That is the $1 million question, right? Because what you are pointing out, we're going to get to that Mishnah at the end, by the way. So not fair giving away a big chidush, Michael, but you are too well prepared for this shiur. So I will say, I think you're asking the great question, which we're going to get to. When a person blesses Dayan Emet, is that, on the one hand, you could say, well, by saying Dayan Emet, they're accepting that God's a true judge. What has happened is what was deservedly supposed to happen, and therefore I'm not going to complain. On the other hand, Michael, you could argue, as I think you might have been saying, but then why are there two different blessings? Shouldn't we just say Hatov HaMeitiv, it's all good over everything that happens? So the very idea that there's a blessing for the true judge over bad things and a blessing over good things of Hatov HaMeitiv indicates that we are aware of the difference. We are aware of when things work out that give us pleasure and joy, and when things work out and there is suffering. The question is, what do we do with that? Are the two different blessings recognizing our human experience and asking us to transcend? Or are the two different blessings say, recognize both experiences and stay with them? But Dayan Emet is still an expression of acceptance on some level. Even though I agree with you, it's not the same sentiment as Hatov HaMeitiv, God that does good. It's a beautiful question. Nikolaya, did you have a question?
Hi. I had a comment, which you might be getting to right after this. What's jumping out to me is the difference between like internal radical acceptance and then how that translates to how you behave and act in the world.
Okay, Nikolai, you did this to me every Mishnah class, and now you're doing it to me again. That's just we're about to get into.
Great.
Right. So let's do the next couple sources and see if your insight is going to be answered. And then if not, you're going to come back and say, no, I wasn't pointing to that at all. And you cut me off and you ruined my whole experience. Okay? She's still there? I hope she's still there.
I'm still here. Yes. There's no way you could ruin my whole experience.
But put out
everything is for the good.
I did cut you off. Put your question out in a clear way that you're getting it.
No, I'm happy to hold on to it.
No. I think it's important. It's gonna help us transition.
Oh, okay. So my question then is seeing how to word it. Where's the line? I guess like what's the boundary between an internal acceptance and internal acknowledgement that everything that happens is good, or that we accept, that we don't put a value judgment on what's happening, and also acknowledge that we as humans, I'm thinking a lot about like co-creation with God. I think like we're created in God's image, and like we take action and agency in our lives, and the choice to be passive is itself a choice as well. And
that is a great question. And we're about to jump into that right now. Because what Nikolai is saying is, in both of those stories, in all three of those stories, the strength that Nachum Ish Gamzu and Rabbi Akiva portray is they don't intervene or interfere. Right? Nachum Ish Gamzu is the guy, he just takes what's here and brings it over to there. He doesn't open the box, doesn't look into the box, doesn't try to talk to the emperor out of it. Eliyahu has to come and speak for him. He doesn't even defend himself. Now, all that passivity made space for a miracle. Rabbi Akiva's passivity made space for a natural miracle, right? That he managed to hide out in the field. Nobody saw him when the city was conquered and everyone was presumably killed in the city or harmed in the city. And even at the moment of Shema, his passivity, he accepts Ol Malchut Shemayim, right? By allowing what's happening to him to happen without rage or anger, he fulfills this great mitzvah he's always dreamt of. But in all of those stories, the strength is in the passivity and the acceptance. And now Nikolai, our old friend, says, well, okay, I see that there's a tremendous power in being able to accept. But does our tradition really endorse all that passivity? And what about Rabbi Akiva? And so it turns out Rabbi Akiva did not endorse passivity. And I'm just going to give you a couple sources that illustrate. There are all these stories about different rabbis who engage Roman emperors in conversation. In this case, right, rabbis are always engaging Roman emperors, and they're always traveling to inns. Apparently that was, and I guess they're connected, because in order to go meet with the emperor, you got to stop over in an inn, because Eretz Yisrael is not so close to Italy. In any event, Ma'aseh shesha'al Tyrannus Rufus harasha Rabbi Akiva. The evil Turnus Rufus said to Rabbi Akiva, I have a question for you, Rabbi. Ezo ma'aseh ma'asim na'im. What are the prettier, nicer, aesthetically more pleasing things? Shel kadosh baruch hu, or shel basar v'dam? Right? Who makes things better, Rabbi? God or human beings? Now, this is like a setup question. You see where he's going to be going with this one. Amar lo, Rabbi Akiva says, shel basar v'dam na'im. Human things made by human beings are better. How's that for a heretical answer from Rabbi Akiva? Amarlo Turnus Rufus said to him, how can you say that? Look at the world, heaven and earth. Human beings can't make that. How could you say something about a human being is better than what God made? Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, lo tomar li b'dvar shehu lamala min habriot, she'ein sholtin alav. Hey, that's not a fair question. Don't ask me about things that are beyond human control. Of course, a human being can't make the sun or an ocean. Give me something where us and God can both do something. Ela morvrim shem mutzim b'vnei adam. Give me an example from things that human beings do make. And now, of course, comes the question that he is being set up. Turnus Rufus asked him, Lama atem mulin, why do you circumcise? Right? You're a believing Jew. You believe in God. God made you a certain way. Why do you change it? God made you a certain way. And here you are with all the arrogance, thinking that you can do better than God. Amar lo. I knew what you were asking me, Rabbi Akiva says. And that's why I began by saying to you, that's why I said that what human beings do is in fact better than what God does. Hevilo Rabbi Akiva shibolim v'gluschaot. Rabbi Akiva brought out wheat stalks, and delicious rolls and cakes. Amar lo, elu maseh kadosh baruch hu, elu maseh de adam. One of these is made by God, the other is made by people. Amar lo, ein elu na'im yoter min shibolim. Aren't these cakes better than the wheat? Right? If you sat down for lunch, what you going to take, Turnus Rufus? Amarlo Turnus Rufus, im hu chafetz b'milah lama en yotzei vlad mahu meimo. If God wanted circumcision, why didn't God make the baby circumcised? Amarlo Rabbi Akiva, the lama shoruro yotzei imo v'hu tali v'no v'imo chodcho. And why are children born attached to the mother and the mother has to cut the umbilical? Now, the reference to birth is a striking reference. What's Rabbi Akiva saying? He's saying that Turnus Rufus is basically going after him, saying there's something heretical in the way you Jews circumcise babies. It is an assault on God's creation. And Rabbi Akiva is basically answering him, we are here to improve God's creation. We do it all the time. We do it when we eat. We do it when we light a fire to heat our homes. We do it when a baby is born and we cut the umbilical cord. We are built to improve God's world, which then, of course, brings us back to Nikolai's point. Don't we endorse the idea that it's our responsibility to improve the world? Well, if that's the case, there's something very tricky about that, because improving the world means you are going to have to judge and notice when things are not where they need to be. Right? Gam Zula Tova is not an approach when you need to fix and improve the world. Right? By the way, there's another example where Turnus Rufus is debating with Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva's student, and says, why do you get stuck at the poor people? God made them poor. Who are you to mess around with that? And Rabbi Meir basically gives them the same answer, right? We are here. God put poor people here so we could be righteous. That's what we're here to do, is to take care of other people. That's why God made the world the way he did. He made an imperfect, problematic world to leave space for us to improve it, alleviate suffering, and make things better. That is the very nature of how God made us. So Rabbi Akiva is basically saying to him, when human beings make things, it's more important than those things that were made by God, because we're the ones that God empowered to be, as Nikolai said, God's partner in making those things better. So of course what we do is better, because that's us doing our job, as opposed to a stalk of wheat growing from the ground where it has no choice. Every time we choose to make something to improve the world in some way, that's always going to be better, because that's us doing what God designed for us to do. So theologically speaking, we're not saying we're better than God. We're saying this is what God made us for. But now we have a problem. We have a problem in that what should our attitude towards the world be? Should our attitude towards the world be one of acceptance, lack of judgment, everything's l'tova? Well, that might work in a lot of circumstances, but what about the time when the poor person says, I need food? Is Nachum Ish Gamzu supposed to turn to the guy and say, no, don't worry, you being terribly impoverished, Gamzulit, and walk away? A person is feeling sick, Gamzulatova. We're not going to go get a doctor. There's a tension here. There is a tension between Gamzulatova and our responsibility to fix and improve. I want to give another example. Rabbi Akiva, the author of Everything That God Does Is for the Good, was also a messianist. He is the one who supported Bar Kokhba and believed that Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach. As reported in the Yerushalmi, Tana Rishon Yochai, Akiva Rabbeinu Hayad Doresh, Derech Kochav Miyakov, Derech Kuzaba Miyakov. That the star that will come forth, predicting the Mashiach, that's Koziva, that's Bar Kokhba. That's why they called him Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva gave him the name. He's the Messiah. Rabbi Akiva looked around and said, we're going to fix the world right now. And he supported him in war. We're going to make this happen. We're going to bring redemption. It is the greatest act of lack of passivity. I know that's a double negative than one could imagine. You're not going to sit back and just try and hope redemption happens. You're going to make it happen. And he would say, this is the King Mashiach. And of course, Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta said, Rabbi Akiva, grass will grow on your cheeks and the Mashiach will still not have come. This ain't it. Turns out, unfortunately, Rabbi Akiva was wrong. But he was a messianic activist who joined an army, who joined a rebellion against Rome. You can't get more activist than that. He didn't sit back and say, well, the temple's been destroyed, Rome is in charge of the land of Israel, the Jewish people are living without sovereignty, Gam Zu L'Tov. No. He said, we need a Mashiach. We need to fix it. We need to change it. He was so activist, you could argue he was overly activist, and it all ended in a terrible failure. The Bar Kokhba rebellion ended in a terrible failure. But Rabbi Akiva now is a model of activism. He is a model of the person who says we have to take charge of the world that we are in and improve it. It's on us. We're not going to passively wait for God. So the question, of course, is how do we live with both? How is Rabbi Akiva both the author of It's All for the Good from his Rebbe, everything God does is for the good, and at the same time be a champion of human intervention and activity? Because if everything is good, you don't need to act. The only time you need to act is when you see something can be better or something is wrong that needs to be fixed. How do we do that? So this paradox, I think it was Michael who put us onto this Mishnah. This paradox appears already in the Mishnah in a very, very strong way. I'm going to pause here. Is the point clear to everybody? Are there any questions, thoughts, complaints, outrage? Okay, Yarden, there's no outrage. Oh, finally, some outrage. Hi, Judith. Go ahead.
Well, it's just very, very muddy, isn't it? Because one person may think it's a time to act, another one may not. And then what's the correct action or the best action? And it's just down to individual, I think, interpretation or whatever the sages have.
Yeah. Well, once upon a time, we'd get a prophet that would tell us. And then once they're no more, and we didn't listen to them anyways, because then there were false prophets. You had to decide who was right and who was wrong. The bottom line is, Judith, you're right. We argue about it all the time.
Also, there are things that it isn't even clear cut. It's like, well, in this way, if we do this, it's for the good. but it has the negative implications as well.
It's always a machloket, isn't it?
Yeah.
First of all, does this need to be fixed? Second of all, how do we fix it? And third of all, who should fix it? We argue about all of those all the time. You are correct. Yes, Nancy and Joel, two familiar faces.
Hi. Oops, wait a second. Oh, yeah, I'm on. Okay.
You're good.
So I'm wondering if there's a difference between accepting something that happens to you just on a personal level within your own sphere compared to what's happening within the communal level or the societal level or the world level that really feels like it needs to be fixed. Maybe, you know, railing against somebody's death or a lost relationship isn't something that can be fixed, you know, and something else good might come from that. Whereas something that's going to affect the, you know, mankind or the Jewish people, whatever, has a different implication.
It could be. So you're saying there might be ways to try to distinguish, is what you're pointing at, between when we need one and when we need the other. Beautiful point. We're going to see if I think we're going to come to that, and then you'll tell me if you think this division is going to make sense. Yes, Joel.
Nothing unusual about a person having two different viewpoints at different times in his life.
Well, you know, I don't know if it was different times in his life, because when he's killed at the end, that's after the failed messianic movement. So at the height of his greatest act of acceptance is coming a mere hours after his greatest fight to fix and change the world. So I think he's in both modes all the time, if you look at the timeline. But I don't know. It could be he changed. It could be he shifted. You're 100% right about that. I don't know. But I think he's really both, and I'll show you why in a minute. Yes, Jeffrey.
So I think this may overlap with a comment that I think Michael made, or a question he asked. But I wonder, is there a difference between acceptance in the sense of the sort of the Nahum sense of this will all be for the good, right? This is I don't have an objection to what is happening. This is all, you know, this is, things are working out. And what I think is sort of the sentiment which is captured by the Buddhist teacher, right? Which is things can't be any different. I think there's a huge difference between things things can't be worse, or things, this is for the good and things can't be any different. The latter, almost, I think you can use the latter, or have the latter, almost without any moral judgment whatsoever, right? You can say the universe is deterministic.
Yeah.
Everything is as it must be, because this is the interaction of the chemical universe, and things can't have turned out any differently. That can be very amoral, right? Whereas saying that I'm satisfied with life has a moral imprint on it.
Well, it's a good question, right? Gamzu l'tov, if everything is for the good and there really is no bad, it's hard to understand what the moral differentiation would be, right? If everything's good, then there really is no bad, we were in that paradox that Nikolai mentioned, because maybe you only have to say everything is for the good when you're already witnessing that something not good is happening. So you have to affirm it in the face of that. So that would seem to suggest that and by the way, Tara Brock would agree, at level one, we are sensing, our minds are telling us something wrong is happening. The question is then what we do with that and how we process it. And if you say everything is for the tov, then really there is no ra. Bad is just an illusion. And if you can just get yourself to see through that illusion, then it's all goodness all the time. But I think you're right. If that's the case, the reason that's problematic is because morality seems to say, no, you got to make choices. There is good and there is bad, and people can do good things, people can do bad things. And we're not going to watch other people do bad things and say gamzu l'tova. We're not going to watch ourselves do bad things and say gamzu l'tova. So I think you're on it. So what do? How are we going to be both people of acceptance and people who make moral choices and try to improve and fix and better the world with all of our and fulfill that element of what God wants us to do? So the Mishnah itself, I think it was Michael who put us onto this Mishnah, and now I'm feeling like so lucky that I included it in the source sheet, says as follows. Chayav, this is the last Mishnah in Brachot, but Chayav adam levrech ala ra'ah kashem shem levrech ala tova. A person is obligated to bless on the bad just as he's obligated to bless on the good. And I want to point out to you here that the bracha of Dayan Emet is not mentioned here. In fact, there's a debate in the Gemara whether it should be two separate brachot or one. Do we say everything's for the good, or do we acknowledge some things are good, some things are not good? I mean, the Mishnah itself says it's bad, but then you have to bless over it. Well, why am I blessing over it if it's bad? In other words, we're back to the same paradox. Is there good and bad, or are we trying to say really everything is good? And then it quotes the Shema. First it says, with both your hearts, so to speak, means with your two yitzarim, your yetzer tov and yetzer hara. Again, evil and good. Well, that means there is evil in us, and there is evil in the world. We have a yetzer hara and a yetzer hatov. On the other hand, if we can serve God with our evil impulse, maybe that evil impulse really isn't evil. We're stuck in that same paradox. Does evil really exist and has to be confronted? Or really, we have to understand in the end, there really is no evil. And then it points us to the case of Rabbi Akiva. Afilu notelet nafshecha. B'chol nafshecha, with all of your soul, even if God's going to take your soul. V'chol meodecha, even with all your money. And then it says, it goes on, another learning, another teaching, davar acher, b'chol meodecha, b'chol midah umidah shumoded, havo modelo b'meod meod. Whatever God meets out to you, you have to thank him very much. Which would seem to be the articulation of Gamzu Latova. Whatever happens, be grateful, presumably because whatever happens to you is for the good. So the Mishnah plays with good and evil. It acknowledges that we experience Ra'ah and Tova. Otherwise, we don't have to tell us about Livarech ala Ra'ah and Tova. But then it seems to challenge us to blur the lines. Really, it's all good. This is the articulation of Nachum Ish Gamzu. This is Rabbi Akiva in the moment of saying Shema at his death. But then the Mishnah continues. And this is a very important word. Hit kinu. The rabbis made a takana. They made a change. They made a new rule. They tried to fix something. Shehei adam sholat shalom chavro b'shem. That from now on, when a person greets another person, they should use God's name. And they quote from the Book of Ruth, because that's what Boaz did. Boaz bami Beit Lechem and said to the harvesters, Hashem imachem, God be with you. And they said back to him, God should bless you. And they bring another example, and somebody else said, Hashem is with you, great warrior. And they also say, and then they go on to say, well, I'll get there in 1 second. Look what just happened here. They made a change. They were concerned. They had to struggle. Is it better that people protect God's name and keep it sacred and don't use it? Or are people so using God's name infrequently, we have to make a change and encourage them to use God's name? And then the Mishnah finishes with how could they do such a thing? And they quote, well, just look at the second verse. I'm looking at my watch and worrying about time. Eit lasot lashem eferu torata. The verse says, it is a time to do for God. They are canceling your Torah. But the Drash, Rabbi Natan said, Heferu toratecha eit lasot Hashem. When it's time to work for God, you can cancel out the Torah. The highest example of human initiative. If we need to, we're going to ignore God. We're going to ignore the Torah for God's sake, because the situation is so urgent, so necessary. So in this very Mishnah, we have the paradox. We blur good and evil. We bless over the bad. We accept the bad. We try to express gratitude for the bad. At the same time, we need to fix. And if the need is so great, we will cancel out the Torah itself because the need is so strong. One Mishnah, two extremes. The Mishnah of Rabbi Akiva. So what do I do with that? Which is really what we're all wondering about. So it occurred to me, Rabbi Akiva's posture is the posture of a stoic with Emunah. Please don't quote me. I might get kicked out of some Rabbi Akiva club. Here's the stoic philosophy. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control and which have to do with choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself, the choices that are my own. And I think Nancy already said this. She didn't even need Epictetus. She came to the Stoic genius on her own. We need wisdom to differentiate. When the things that are happening are out of my control, I can either choose anger or try to find gratitude and try to find the Torah. But the things that are in my control, I have to fix and change and improve. That's my job as a human being. The challenge, of course, is finding the wisdom between the two. And just to finish up, then I'll take some questions. The reason I add with Emunah is because it's not only about acceptance, it's something a little larger than acceptance, which is what Rav Kook wrote right over and over again. We'll just take a look briefly. Everything that occurs in the world from generations ago until the end of time combined together to a complete creation. Until the ultimate form appears that brings everything together to completion, there is good and evil, truth and falsehood, impurity and purity, holy and secular. However, when the light of unification appears, the purpose of all these aspirations and partial recognitions will be clarified, and all will be recognized as good, truth, purity, holiness in the world that is entirely Shabbat, that is entirely good. Rav Kook is saying we live in that paradox. On the one hand, from our limited human perspective in our lives, of course there's good and evil. Of course there's purity and impurity. Of course there's suffering and joy. We live in an ununified world. However, he says, we have a capacity to imagine a redeemed world where all those different things that came into it are revealed to have served some higher, greater purpose, where there will be a great unification of everything and everything will be good. But we have to live in both worlds. We have to live in the world of the moment where we identify the bad and either come to grips with it, accept it if we can't change it or do anything about it, try to find a good in it, try to accept it, but never become insensitive to the things that we can fix and change. And I'm just going to finish with one more comment, and I'm going to listen to your questions. It can be a very interesting exercise. I'll preface saying I make this mistake all the time. I worry is a classic example. I invest emotional energy in worrying about things I can't change or help. And I get lazy and willfully ignorant of the things I can do to improve and make people's lives better. And the challenge is to do the reverse, right? The challenge is to try to accept the things that I can't change and trust that there's an ultimate good that's going to come out of it at some point in the cosmos, but be radically engaged with the things that I can help and improve and fix and be sensitive to those things all the time. And it's a great exercise. Make a list. Make a list of the things that trouble you, bother you, worry you, and then make some columns. If it's something that you can do something about, outline a behavior you can take on to try to make it better. If it's something you can't make better, try to find something to be grateful about it in any event. Try it as an exercise, and then you let me know. Allison, then Mitchell, and then Judith.
I find it fascinating how similar, and I don't know if it probably struck other people the same way, how similar that is to the 12-step program motto of accept the
Yeah,
change
the
thing.
serenity prayer.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Big fan of the serenity prayer. Yep.
This actually takes it a step further because it says go out and really and do change.
That's exactly right. The things you can't fix, get up off the couch and do something. The things you can't fix, don't use up all your valuable emotional energy and time with bitterness and anger about it. Use your time to fix the things that you can fix. Yes, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was actually going to quote the Serenity Prayer, which sounded very similar. I never thought of Reinhold Niebuhr as a Stoic, but maybe that's where it comes from. But I was also going to, you have to emphasize the second half of it, which is to have the courage to change the things that you can change.
That's correct.
And you have to have both sides of it. And I would add also the humility to recognize that you're not always going to get it right, and to forgive yourself and others when we mess up between.
That is correct.
Thinking we can change things that we can't, or thinking we can't change things that we can, because
correct. For that, we need to pray for wisdom. That's exactly right. Yeah. I'd like to think that that's a wisdom that Torah learning can give us if we study Torah, and others can give us if we listen to other people around us. But
I think that's right. I mean,
that takes a lot of work.
That's why we have the tradition, and that's why we learn to get better at
I
that.
believe so.
But we still need the humility.
That's the hope, but we're not going to get it 100% right. You are correct. Judith, last comment.
Thank you. I would more emphasize the emunah part of it all. And I want to share something with you very quickly, if I may.
Of course.
I'm based in the UK in London, and I've just come back from the Limud Festival UK, which was absolutely amazing. Quite a few people from Pardes were there. And I work in art, and they had some sessions on using comic books to express Torah ideas and so on. It was called Comic Book with Knives, and the source of it actually is that, evidently I didn't know it, but Jews traditionally were involved in making comic books when other professions and outlets were not available. So I did this in one of the sessions that I'd like to share with you.
Ah, lovely. Emunah.
Emunah, and there's the Torah scroll, and behind it are all these comic book figures like Superman and Woman, and
lovely.
And it kind of connects it up a bit with the golem idea too. So we hang things on whatever we can. So
okay, yafeh ma'od.
They were emphasizing the Emunah part of it all.
Absolutely, Emunah helps a lot. Where I'm out of time, I want to thank all of you for your patience and attention and wisdom, and all your smiling, happy faces. And may we all be blessed with this wisdom to fix and improve and act where we can, and accept with compassion and kindness and forgiveness when we can. It's a blessing we could probably all use.
Thank you so much, Tzvi. Yeah, I just want to close quickly.
A pleasure. And even though it says Tzvi Hirschfield, that's my aunt. That's not me. I don't know why my name is in her box, but we're gonna be okay with that. Yarden, you wanted to say something?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much, Tzvi. This was such a beautiful teaching, and we're so grateful for your 23 years of teaching for the Pardes community. So thank you.
May God bless you with a few more.
Yes, please.
Amen.
Thank you all for attending the Legacy Learning Series. Our next class is coming up on Tuesday, February 7th with Judy Klitzner, teaching on the tent, the field, and the battlefield, how stories of biblical women mine and undermine each other. We hope to see you all there.
Not to be missed, everyone. Not to be missed.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great
day. And thank you to Yarden for doing all the
Thank
work and putting this together. Thank you very much, Yarden.